Labour.
The Self-Determination for Gibraltar group has called on all Gibraltarians to exercise the hard-won right to vote at the European elections at the end of this month. At the last European election in 2009, only 35% of the electorate voted, which was below the average turnout for the Southwest. The group says the right to vote was a tremendously important victory for Gibraltar, and it asks the public to give a little of their time for this principle. Jonathan Sacramento asked SDGG chairman Dennis Matthews if there was a certain disenchantment with Europe among Gibraltarians during the last year.
I know that this is the feeling of a lot of people, but this is like everything else, Jonathan. You have to keep pushing and you have to keep trying. I mean, I remember somebody saying in the street to me a couple of months ago that Gibraltar doesn't get anywhere. Well, we do. We have to struggle and we have to fight for everything. But we do get, somewhere sometimes. And when we achieve something, that's something that becomes permanent. In the European Union, what you've got to do is keep pushing and keep going to our MEPs and saying, look, this is a problem. It is not right what they're doing. It's illegal. It doesn't conform with European Union policy and free movement and all the rest of it, and see what you can do about it. And we have got one or two people, as everybody knows, who do take the issue of Gibraltar up as often as they can and who do defend our rights in Europe.
We'll be back with more of this week's news after the break.
The three little pigs decided it was time to sell their homes. The first little pig overpriced his house. It didn't sell, and he blamed the big bad wolf. The second little pig tried to sell his house using social media. All he got was time wasters. The third little pig listed exclusively with Bentley. His house sold, and Bentley paid all his removal costs within Gibraltar, too. For all those clever little pigs out there, contact Bentley Real Estate. To list your property with Bentley, call 200-43-880 or log on to bentleyestates.gi and forget about the big bad wolf.
The rain comes through the cracks in the wall. Don't leave me.
Sessions Thursdays at 9 on GBC. Live music and chats with local musicians.
Today. Maybe you're sleeping.
Welcome back. The government and the opposition have once again clashed on the issue of fishing. The GSD claims that Spanish fishermen are better informed of the government's plans than they are. But Number 6 Convent Place has countered that the leader of the opposition, Daniel Feetham, adopts contradictory positions and that the former GSD government never consulted. Our news editor, Stephen Nish, spoke to Chief Minister Fabian Picardo, but first to Mr. Feetham.
Well, look, the problem is that we seem to be hearing more about this and getting more informed about this from the Spanish press than we do from the government in Parliament. I mean, it's a very simple point. And although you always take reports in the Spanish press with a pinch of salt, we know by the government's own admission, because they made this public in response to questions from the press on the 30th of April, that a discussion paper has actually been circulated amongst Spanish fishermen discussing the proposed changes to the law in order to regulate fishing with nets in British Gibraltar territorial waters. And I have been asking Mr. Picardo questions about this for a very long time indeed, about what the government intends to do. What's the framework? Will Spanish fishermen be required to apply for a license in British Gibraltar territorial waters? And he has, every single time that I've asked the question, he has refused. But look, it's much more than just simply a transparency point. I think that Gibraltar really needs to be putting this behind it. And the government, 2.5 years after, in my view, it plunged us into an unnecessary crisis by doing away with the 1999 agreement without having anything to take its place, doesn't appear to be any closer to resolving this particular issue. And
you say that they don't seem to be any closer, but of course you're not privy to the discussions that are taking place, and isn't it, from a government point of view, prudent that they should be discussing this, if you like, bilaterally with the people affected, rather than having to make public statements even to the opposition?
Well, I agree that the government ought to be discussing it with the Spanish fishermen. I've said so publicly myself. As long as the Spanish fishermen are left in absolutely no doubt that this is not a question of anybody in Spain vetoing what we legislate here in Parliament.
But why do you say that, Mr. Feetham? Why do you suspect that what the government is in fact doing is giving the Spanish fishermen the right of veto?
Well, no, Stephen, I haven't said that the government are giving a right of veto.
You're saying that they may be?
I don't know, because of course...
You're raising the points.
No, but of course Mr. Picardo refuses to answer questions in Parliament about this. And there are reports in Spain about attempts to reach agreements. This is not about reaching agreement. This is about consulting people, saying, look, this is what we want, this is what we intend to be doing in relation to this. But it now appears, actually, that the process has got to the end of its cycle, because they're not accepting it. They're not accepting whatever proposals the government, and I don't know, whatever proposals the governments are putting forward or points for discussion, they're not accepting it. I think it's about time now that the government legislated in order to regulate fishing with nets in British Gibraltar territorial waters, and equally as importantly, make sure that afterwards our laws are properly enforced, because what you don't do is legislate and introduce legislation that you don't enforce.
I don't think that Mr. Feetham can be taken seriously on this issue at all. He used to say in Parliament that I should have spoken to the Spanish fishermen before undoing the fishing agreement of 1999. Now he seems to be saying that I shouldn't be speaking to the Spanish fishermen without speaking to him first. I mean, what is it that is his position? He changes his position so often that one must think that he is not really serious about this issue. He's just trying to exploit it for the maximum possible political gain. This is a sensitive issue that affects Gibraltar. It's in the public interest of Gibraltar that your government should act in the proper way, however long that may take.
And you say however long that may take. Is there any indication? Can you perhaps tell us how soon people can expect to see legislation, or at least a bill published that goes to Parliament in order to resolve this?
This is not an issue involving a bill going to Parliament. What we're doing is talking to all stakeholders, both in Gibraltar and, of course, in relation to some technical aspects of this. Some technical teams of the Gibraltar government have spoken to some of the technical people who the Cofradía of la Línea have suggested we should speak to. But I think there will be legislation very soon by way of regulation which will deal with a lot of the issues that concern local fishermen, and issues which relate to fishing by Spanish fishermen in Gibraltar waters may take a little bit longer to resolve. Look, if that is the position, it's going to have to be done that way.
When you say very soon, this side of the summer?
Well, certainly I expect that this side of the summer we'll be seeing a lot of regulation of the issues that happen in Gibraltar that concern a lot of the local fraternity. But it'll happen when it happens. The opposition, when they were in government, did not consult the government on absolutely anything. For Mr. Cavana, consultation meant picking up the phone where the constitution or law required it and saying to the then leader of the opposition, Mr. Bossano, or me, Joe or Fabian, this is what I am going to do. That was consultation a la GSD.
One of the points that Mr. Feetham consistently makes is that he'd like to know from you whether the Spanish fishermen will be required to apply for a license in order to fish. Can you answer that question today?
Yes, indeed. What Mr. Feetham is repeatedly saying is he'd like to know the details of the legislation or regulation that we're going to be coming out with, and he wants to know this particular part and that particular part. And if I had said to Peter Cavana when I was leader of the opposition, or a member of the opposition, Mr. Cavana, as Chief Minister, you must tell me today what you're going to regulate for tomorrow or you're going to legislate for tomorrow, he would have said, look, legislation when it's a bill is published 6 weeks before it's brought to Parliament, and regulations you read in the Gazette.
So in other words, you can't really say today, you'd rather not?
Well, no, it's not a question of I can or cannot really rather say. It's that there is a process by which legislation and regulations are dealt with. It has been established now for, in Gibraltar, 300 years, because it's a system that hasn't much changed. Under our new constitution, we have new parameters, and those are the parameters that we use. I mean, Mr. Feetham can ask as many questions as he likes in Parliament. And do you remember, Stephen, when Gibraltar used to have a parliamentary session twice a year? Well, Mr. Feetham might realise he has 10 sessions of Parliament in which to ask questions.
The opposition says it was not approached by the government ahead of the announcement of a public consultation exercise on whether Gibraltar should join the Schengen Agreement and the EU's Common Customs Union. This, the GSD says, despite the government's claim to be seeking bipartisanship on the issue. The opposition says that if it had been consulted, it would have advised the Chief Minister that there are other more important and pressing issues at the moment. The GSD asks what's driving this initiative now and what preliminary work has been done. It also asks for the government's own view on whether it would be good for Gibraltar to join the customs union and Schengen. The opposition highlights the political, constitutional and economic consequences these changes could have for Gibraltar, going on to say that, with respect to Mr. Picardo, raising this issue at this time makes no sense at all. And the government says it has received huge support from businesses in Gibraltar for its exercise to analyse the possible membership of Schengen and the Customs Union, and is convinced, therefore, that it was right to have announced it last week. In response to criticism from the opposition, the Chief Minister, who was in meetings in London, says he's been struck by overwhelming support for the consultation process, which will be carried out together with the Chamber of Commerce and the GFSB. He says the time has been rightly chosen, given that the UK itself is analysing its own membership of the European Union, with a referendum expected in 2017. Mr. Picardo says he agrees that his government is taking on a huge number of projects, but sees no reason why he shouldn't be able to deal with this issue alongside others. He says the leader of the opposition is the only person seeking to create uncertainty, because he is so uncertain of his own position. And the leader of the opposition, Daniel Feetham, has hinted that he might not continue in politics if the GSD loses the next general election. Mr. Feetham was speaking at a news conference in response to the recent direct democracy session of the Chief Minister. Daniel Feetham said that with hard work and by providing an alternative vision, the GSD has a good chance of winning the election.
I am prepared. I don't think you should read anything into this other than what my present intentions and my, the spirit in which I'm telling you this. I am prepared to be a night watchman if that is what it takes. In other words, holding the party together in difficult times and in difficult circumstances, making sure the party renews, making sure we attract new people, younger people, people that can take it forward in the future. I cannot tell you whether if we lose the election, I'm going to be stepping down or I'm not going to be stepping down. What I will tell you is that by the next election, I expect to have enough people around me of sufficient quality for that to be an option should I choose to take it.
The Chief Justice will consider competing legal arguments for a few weeks before delivering a judgment on whether or not the judge overseeing the Mahrache fraud trial was appointed unconstitutionally.
For the past 2 days, Mr. Justice Dudley has heard the constitutional challenge presented by Benjamin Mahrache, who claims High Court Judge Sir Geoffrey Grigson was older than the 2006 Constitution allows when he was appointed to hear the ongoing multi-million-pound fraud trial in which Mr. Mahrache is a defendant. Mr. Mahrache goes further, claiming no puny judges in Gibraltar have been properly appointed. This position has been countered by lawyers appearing for the Attorney General as a defendant and the Governor as an interested party. These lawyers have described Sir Geoffrey's appointment as perfectly lawful and in accordance with the Constitution. Having received written and heard oral submissions, the Chief Justice is expected to deliver a judgment in the coming weeks.
Local barrister Suresh Matani and businessman Stephen Maring, both aged 46, have been charged with conspiracy to pervert the course of public justice. The two men were arrested last March and appeared in court this week. Mr. Matani faces a further charge of intending to pervert the course of justice. They have been granted bail and the matter has been adjourned until June, when it will come before the Supreme Court. Also this week, 2 members of a Spanish TV crew were arrested after they raised a Spanish flag in Catalan Bay. They've been released on police bail till the 9th of July. International Day Against Homophobia was marked at the Piazza, with the equality rights group calling on Gibraltarians to be the change they want to see in the world. And a 2-ton piece of the rock is to form part of a memorial commemorating 350 years of the Royal Marines at their training camp in Devon. For the rest of this week's news, you can also head over to our website gbc.gi/news. Tune in to Radio Gibraltar and GBC Television throughout the week for the very latest local news. And you can also follow us on Twitter and like us on Facebook. Thank you for watching. Good night.